In this week's episode of Remote Weekly Spotlight, I spoke with Matt Hollingsworth, the head of operations at TinyBoards. Now, TinyBoards owns a range of different job boards, one of those being WeWorkRemotely.com, which is one of my favorite remote job boards and the largest remote hiring site in the world. They get a ton of traffic, they get a ton of remote jobs on there, and we get a backstage pass to look at what is it that companies look for when they're hiring remote job seekers, and what should you do as a remote job seeker. We looked at some of the features and functions of the actual site and did a walkthrough. We talked to them about how companies can post better job listings. This was an awesome conversation. I know you're going to love it if you're interested in remote jobs and finding remote work online. So take a look at this interview with Matt Hollingsworth, the head of operations at TinyBoards. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Remote Weekly Spotlight, the show that gives you the weekly inside look at people who make successful remote companies and how to get a job at one. I couldn't think of a better person to help with this particular topic than Mr. Matt Hollingsworth. And Matt, I appreciate you coming on today. Matt is the head of operations at TinyBoards, which is a company that owns a family of job boards, including one of my favorites, WeWorkRemotely. Also, Unicorn Hunt, Fresh Gigs, Future Jobs, Designer News. By the end of your run, you're probably going to buy every single remote job board out there. But he's also the podcast host of The Remote Show and an avid gardener. And Matt, again, I said, appreciate you joining us today. My first question to you is, what similarities do you find between gardening and your role at TinyBoards?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, first of all, appreciate the invite to come on the show. Excited about this. I've been watching you for a long time as one of those people that's sort of an expert in the work world. So glad to be doing this. That's a good question. So similarities between gardening and what I do and my job. So I think my answer is probably going to be around building things. I like to see things, and I know this is not all of what I do, but just the idea of starting from scratch with a new project or idea and then taking that and sort of plugging away at it. I know with gardening especially, it's one of those things you have to keep on top of, and you do small things every day, and then hopefully by the end of it, you come up with something really beautiful and nice to look at, or something that you can use to feed yourself. So that would be the similarity, I think, just slow progress and hopefully come out on the other side with something interesting.
Yeah. And, I find that gardening can become a metaphor for a lot of things. It's interesting because you can just plant the seeds and then harvest. I think job searching is very similar, right? So when people go through a remote job search, there's a lot of different seeding they need to do, and then they can hopefully harvest the bounty at the end of that. But I wanted to go into kind of your experience with TinyBoards, because I'd say probably a lot of people don't know what TinyBoards is. TinyBoards, but then a lot of people would know maybe the websites that you guys own. So you guys have 5 different sites that you run, and I know as a parent, you're not supposed to have favorites, but do you have any favorites?
Well, so I should say right off the top, we do have other job boards for sure, but the main focus is of our time. So I would say it's probably in the 80% of our time range is WeWorkRemotely. So I think from a favorite standpoint, that would be definitely our favorite. It's just a more like I think the other boards, I don't want to say that they aren't interesting as businesses, and I think that there's good communities around those job boards, and hopefully we're helping people, and I think we are. But the remote work world in general is just a more interesting space right now. It's obviously more relevant just with things that have been going on, but it's something that I think is more helpful to people and to create a better life for them. So when it comes to finding jobs in startups, so the Unicorn Hunt is a startup job board, specifically the UK for the most part. Fresh Gigs is marketing, design, and technology up here in Canada, where I am actually right now. And then WeWorkRemotely is obviously remote specific. So I think it's just a more fun place to be when it comes to businesses, remote work.
Awesome. And I'm wondering, anybody who's watching, we've got a bunch of people here in the private Facebook community and some people on LinkedIn watching. Have you guys heard of any of these job boards, whether it be WeWorkRemotely, Unicorn Hunt, Fresh Gigs, Future Jobs, Designer News? Have any of you guys been on those platforms? I know for me, I've actually used WeWorkRemotely to get a remote job myself. I've had clients who've done that. Some of these other ones I have looked through, but I think, as you mentioned, they're kind of specialty in some ways, right? So unless it's important for you as someone who needs a marketing specific job or something in the UK, like you mentioned, that might not be the right board for you. But I'm curious to know, if you said that WeWork Remotely is what you guys spend 80% of your time on. Why has WeWork Remotely been so successful?
Well, I think WeWork Remotely was in the right place at the right time for a lot of reasons. So I actually started working at WeWork Remotely originally when it was first purchased, and it was purchased by our parents' holding company from actually Jason Fried and DHH of Basecamp a number of years ago. So they bought that, and when I say they, that's Tiny Capital, which is the holding company that owns the businesses that we operate in, and one of those is WeWork Remotely. So they bought the board, and I think that at that point it had a good community around it. Because Basecamp and the folks that run Basecamp were very much remote leaders at the time. They started the job board, and they had a pretty good community around it when we took it over in 2017, early 2017, and so since then, of course, remote work has kind of exploded, and especially over the past 3 months. So we were one of the first remote specific job boards, which makes it pretty, and we've been working on it for a long time. So it's something that I think it's unique to have just online businesses in general that have been around for as long as we have. So they started it when I think it was an internal tool in 2011 or 2012. So it's been around for a long time. And so it just caught a really interesting trend at the right time. And we've been able to optimize it and grow the community and all the kind of stuff that we've done to improve the experience of the board. But in general, I think that the concept and principle of it was a really, right place, right time kind of situation.
Okay. So can you maybe give me like a high overview timeline of your entrance into WeWork Remotely, which is where you started, and then getting acquired, and like all the acquisitions, and which of these maybe had been started by TinyBoards? Like, can you give me a sense of what that timeline was like?
Yeah, so I came on to help with WeWork Remotely. One of the first jobs that I did actually for the owner of Tiny Capital back in 2017. And so again, for me, I've told the story a number of times, so people may have heard it on another podcast, but I started working for Andrew Wilkinson, who started a company called MetaLab, and then has since built out a number of other companies, started a bunch, bought a bunch. I was connected with him back in 2017, and one of the things was I was working in banking at the time, which is hard to believe now, but it was not something I was enjoying doing. Although there are great people that I worked with, it just wasn't really an industry that I was really excited about. And then I offered to, having heard what he was doing, Wilkinson was doing, I offered to work for him for free, essentially, just because I was so interested in the space. And so he said, "Well, no, I'm not gonna not pay you, but essentially, we've just bought this board, and we can help. You can help do support work and different marketing stuff for that." And so I started doing that, and that was 2017. And then since then, we actually haven't started any job boards right from scratch. Growing communities is really difficult, and you have to have somewhat of a foothold in a specific niche if you're going to build a job board around it, just because it's a very uphill battle when it comes to just starting these things from scratch. So we took over. Unicorn Hunt was another 2018 acquisition, and then I believe it was early in that year as well. We took over Fresh Gigs, and we've just kind of been taking over and purchasing these other assets, other job boards when they come up, and if it makes sense. We've also acquired a few other smaller remote specific job boards as well, and done a redirect to WeWork Remotely and added the community that way. So
cool.
Yeah, it's been interesting.
One of the really interesting things that you said was when you started working at WeWork Remotely, you had offered to work for free. Now, the people that I work with are always looking for ways to figure out how can they provide value, how can they get their foot in the door. Yeah. So maybe you can provide some perspective and some context to why you're willing to work for free, and why you think that having that statement, or is there anything else that you did that allowed you to take that initial position? Yeah,
I do recommend that as sort of a strategy. when it comes to really putting yourself out there and trying to find a job that you really want and in a company that you really want. So it depends on your circumstances. And I know not everybody can do that. Not everybody is in a position to say, hey, I'll work entirely for free. And then my offer to Andrew at the time was, if you see value in what I'm doing and if I'm being helpful to you and the company, then after 3 months, we could talk about paying me. And he at the time he said, we don't do that kind of thing, or I don't do that kind of thing, and he just paid me right from the start. But I think that's a good hook, I think, to really get somebody's attention and to show that you're serious about wanting to work for them or for the company that you're choosing, right? So I really like it as just to show how serious you are, and say, look, what's important to me is the value that I'm creating and providing you, as opposed to just assuming that, it's, as opposed to just kind of sitting back and saying, oh, I'd love to work for this company, love to work for this company, I'll put in an application and hope for the best kind of thing. It really differentiates you, and it really shows that you are serious about wanting to work there. And I think it's something that I do recommend. But again, it's not something that, if you have a young family, for example, and you want to get a remote job at a company, and you really like a company, you really like a person, and you just aren't in a position to say, look, I'll work for free. So it's not for everybody, but if you are in that position, and if you do find somebody or some company that you really want to work for, I've seen it be very successful.
Same.
As a way to get somebody's attention and differentiate yourself.
I think it's great that you provided the context too, because that's not going to be for every remote job out there that you want to apply to. Maybe that's for the all-time number one company that you want, the number one role that you want, where you think you can provide value. And I think even beyond just offering to do something for free for a company like that, you still have to find ways to provide value to companies to get into the door.
Yeah.
It may not always be the pitch to work for free, but there's some level of value that you have to provide in differentiation, which you mentioned as well. So I think that's really cool. And then how did you find yourself go from that role to where you're at now?
Well, it was kind of the evolution of the company in a lot of ways. So I've just filled the gap when they came up, and whether it was support or whether there was business development or sales directly or just strategy work from the business side of things. It was just something. We're a very small team, and we still are a very small team. And I find myself doing a lot of different things, and that's sort of what I say to people when they ask me what I do for a living. It's a very hard thing to be able to say from like specifically what I do every day, because it's very different. I do the podcast. I do some of the business development side of things. I manage I help manage a small team, and there's acquisitions that come up. So it's really, and that's what I love about it. And that fits my personality traits. I think I get bored very easily, and I'm interested in a lot of different things. So that's one of the reasons why I needed to get it. I wanted to get out of banking as fast as I did, was because I just couldn't imagine myself being in a bank and working there for 30 years and then getting a retirement. Yeah. And just like, that scares me. I maybe it's just like a deeper psychological issue that I have, but it's kind of one of those things I just can't even imagine being happy in a situation where I know where I'm going to be in 25 years or even 5 years. I love the idea of having some unknown and some potential change, right? I think that's really important.
I think that default future is a really good exercise. And if you had kind of looked at where you're at now and what does that look like in 20 years? What does that look like in 30 years? And I did the same thing when I was working in corporate at IBM. And I had that moment. I'm sitting around the table with these older guys. I was youngest in the room by 20, 30 years. And you just have that like light bulb where we were literally talking about how to save this truck manufacturer money on their warranty claims for door parts. Yeah. So we're talking about how to save money on warranty claim door parts for a truck manufacturer. If you can imagine a more boring conversation, I'd love to hear it. But it was just like, am I going to be sitting in the chair like this in 20, 30 years talking about the same shit? It's like, I want to start having some conversations that I actually enjoy. And I love that you had the wherewithal to know that about yourself in banking and kind of look at the future and say, hey, I want some more uncertainty and I want, something else for my life. And I'm curious, what, if people were to look at your life right now and what they wouldn't understand, like what do most people not know about what it's like to do your job?
Oh, that's a good question. What do people most they don't know about what it? I think it's just doing a lot of small things really well every day. And it's one of, like I heard this quote the other day from I can't remember who it was, but they were just saying how most good businesses and most good work is actually kind of boring and a little bit maybe monotonous, but it means that you have to do quality work every day, and that's something that I try to take pretty seriously. And whether it's responding to emails or whether it's doing some sort of review for a meeting, or I think my job is trying to put together all the component parts to make sure that every small thing goes well. And then how does that play into the long-term goals of the company, and how does it play into each of the individuals that work here? It's just not like super exciting, I think, to run a company really well. And it might seem like, and I it's not to say that it's not an exciting job, but I think that when it comes to doing good work, it's really just about trying to do the best on each of the small things that come up every day. So it's, maybe that's a cop-out answer, but that's probably my actual, that's as close to the reality I think as I'm going to get with that one.
Well, one of the quotes that I love is how you do anything is how you do everything is how you do anything is how you do everything. That's what it is. So it is to say some of those small little details, the intricate things that you take care of on a day-to-day basis to try to figure out how to keep the company moving smoothly, how to make the gains that you need to make, how to be productive. Like those things are so important, down to the tiny details. And I can tell a lot about a person with how detail oriented they are, because often that gives me a good impression of like how they get the big things done, because the big things are just really made up of a bunch of details.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. What do you think's been your biggest contribution to TinyBoards, to WeWorkRemotely, to this whole kind of network?
These are really good questions. My biggest contribution is likely just trying to steer the ship in the right direction, I think. And again, it's a hard question to answer yourself, because it's going to automatically seem a little bit boastful, I think. Like it's a hard question to answer. And I think you would probably want to talk to people I work with to get that answer. But again, I'm going to go probably revert back to my original answer to your question before, which was to say, like, I think I do a lot of different things pretty well. And I think that I fill gaps well when they come up, and in a small team that can be really impactful, whether it comes to treating a customer well, or resolving a situation with the support team, or doing the minutiae of trying to track down a really good lead for a sales call, or preparing for weekly touch point meetings with our team and doing it well, and sending reviews back and all of that kind of stuff. I think it's hard to say one specific thing, but I think on the whole, I do a lot of different things well, and I hope that has contributed to the company's success. And if not, then you can talk to my employees and see, or employees, and see if that's true or not. I don't know.
Well, you probably wouldn't be there if it wasn't the case. I assume.
That's yeah, maybe you're right, but it's still a hard question to answer, honestly.
Sure. What makes a good job board?
What makes a good job board is, so there's two sides obviously to the marketplace, and what makes a good job board is keeping both sides very happy and coming back. And we take our customer retention analytics pretty seriously. We take things like how quickly does a job get filled pretty seriously. All those things that again seem very small and maybe a little bit boring in terms of consistency, we take very seriously. So when it comes to the job seeker side of things, making sure that we provide quality jobs and we provide them in a way that's easy to maneuver around. And we still have a lot of work to do when it comes to our front end and our job seeker experience, but helping people find jobs is really what we try, like the basics of what we do. And so if we do that well, then I think we're doing, we're doing what we should be doing. So I think it's hard, like I said before, it's hard to start a job board from scratch. and really create a lot of value on both sides. And you either have to have the job seeker community around you first and then provide jobs to those people, or you need to have the employers and then try to build out a job seeker community around it. And it's hard to do, but I think we have 500, 600 people, different companies posting jobs every month. We have almost 400,000 people per month coming to the site, unique users coming to the site, and a lot more that are coming back on a regular basis. So I think those analytics show that we are doing the best job we can, and we're constantly reaching out to quality remote companies to get them on board and trying to offer some value on that side of things. But it's about doing both sides of the marketplace and allowing for a lot of value to be created on both sides.
Seems like a delicate dance you have to do in between both, and especially if you were to start it from scratch, like that's why it's so hard, right? It's because it's a chicken and egg situation. Yeah, it seems like you have to have one or the other to support the other, and that just kind of sounds crazy.
And it's kind of it's an uphill battle because there's always the possibility, and we keep this, like I try to think of ways that our business and our community could go to zero essentially, or things could really break. And one of the ways that it could break down for us is, and for any job board in general, is that the biggest network typically wins when it comes to communities and businesses that rely on large communities. So we have seen Google, for example, has been aggregating jobs to the top of their feed now and have been doing so for a long time. But when you do rely on those kinds of browsers and communities that could go anywhere to find jobs, we have to be really careful, and we have to try to continue to improve to make sure that people stick around, because there's always going to be the LinkedIn of the world. There's always going to be the Glassdoors and the bigger companies that do the job very well because they have large teams and they have a lot of venture-backed money and all that kind of stuff. So we are constantly thinking about, or at least I am constantly thinking about that, is how could this go to zero? And so it's maybe not a fun thought experiment, but it's part of my job.
Right. So tell me what that looks like. So how do you evaluate like what's most important with such a small team and having to constantly improve both sides of the experience? What's like your, I don't know if it's decision-making process or your thought stream on how you go from what needs to happen next to make this better and then actually executing that?
Yeah, so I think it's really just about, and there's all kinds of different strategies when it comes to execution, but as long as we know that we're continually providing value, and we can see that, right? It's pretty easy for us to understand where our gaps are, and because we get a lot of feedback and we get a lot of numbers all the time. So we know when things are going in the right direction or the wrong direction. And so when it comes to potential risks to the business and risks to the community, we can look out and only project over the next maybe, it's hard to make projections, especially when it comes to technology businesses. So when it comes to things that we think are important, it really comes down to what are the basics of what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide quality jobs to people, and we're trying to allow employers to fill jobs faster. So as long as all of the strategy work that we have and gets broken down into, okay, making sure that those two major components of our business are continually improving, as long as that's the guidepost that we use, and that's the thing that we're always thinking about. We might make mistakes, but at least we're moving in the right direction, or at least we're thinking about the right things.
Yeah. And I think everyone's kind of got their own process for figuring out what that is, but it's interesting to hear about how some of those statistics might influence where you go with that. I'm curious. So I want to look at both sides, right? So like there's a job seeker side, which is I'm sure what a lot of people in my audience are interested in because they're looking for jobs for the most part. When you're on the job seeker side, let's just say that, Matt, through this computer, you can control my hands, my body as I'm going on to WeWorkRemotely.com. I click on the site. You're doing it. You're making me do it. And I'm just like, I'm kind of a puppet. WeWorkRemotely.com. I get there. How WeWorkRemotely is designed? Take me through the ideal experience.
Sure. So the ideal experience would be, and what we've tried to stay true to when it comes to the actual experience of the user is just simplicity. And it's going to be, we definitely have gaps, and of course there are things we can improve on. But when it comes to just seeing jobs right away and finding jobs, we went through a pretty big redesign over the past year, and part of the redesign process was trying to stay true again to just how simple the job seeker experience is. So you can, as an ideal experience, you go to the main page. So the newest jobs, I'm not sure if everybody knows this, but the newest jobs in the newest category will appear at the top of the feed, and the top of the feed will be based on the different the different options when the employer will choose, which the employer will choose through the checkout process. And so I think the ideal experience would be, you can always search at the top of the search bar to figure out which category, or you can use the drop-down category to make sure you're looking at relevant jobs. The top ones are going to be the newest ones. And so I think that's really, and it's such an easy, straightforward experience that I hope that these things are intuitive, but of course it's not always the case. So for example, if you're looking for a sales and marketing job, if you don't see that by scrolling down, because there's a lot of jobs in the main feed, but if you don't find that one by scrolling down in the main feed, you can always go to the sales and marketing job page, and all of the jobs in sales and marketing will be there. You can sign up for push notifications, so any real-time job alerts when any new job in each category gets posted, you can get real-time updates for that. And then you can also sign up for our daily digest email. So all the new jobs in specific categories get sent to you at the end of each day. And so just one of those things to keep tabs on any new job that's relevant to you.
Cool. And I think the digest is something really to focus on, because a lot of people spend a ton of time on remote job boards.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's a proper use of time. I think you should leverage these job boards to send you the types of job boards that you need, rather than spend all of your time staring and hoping that something else could have them do the work for you, right? And that's part of the experience, is making that more simple. So for anybody out there who is watching this, you can go on the WeWorkRemotely website, and in any of these categories, whether it be all other jobs or whether it be programming jobs, there's places where you can enter in your email and subscribe, and there'll be different options of when you can have those sent to you, which is every day, and the different options down here of which ones to add. So I've always found the platform to be really easy to kind of navigate, and if you wanted to go to any other categories, you can kind of go up here. Any other things that you'd want to point out kind of on a screen share here of what you feel like is either one of the best features of WeWorkRemotely or speaks to the simplicity?
Yeah. So you've covered the basics of it, but I think it's also, so if you go to, I'm not sure if it's easy for us to do it here, but if you go to, you can actually find and click, a lot of the inputs in the checkout flow for the employers are clickable, which just means that if you're looking for a job, let's say, because a lot of people are looking time zone based, they're looking at different regions specifically. So you can also do, there is a way that you can actually find the page for specifically what time zone you're in, or specifically what region you're in as well.
Oh, cool. So how do we do that?
Yeah, so if you go, you likely would have to go to an actual job.
Okay.
You scroll down to one of the jobs there, see that one there, and that one will say anywhere at the top there, and one of the tags.
Yeah.
So
okay.
That's a specific tag that they've been able to use, and that'll differentiate.
Cool.
Yeah, so you can go there and you can see 100% jobs, and of course we rely on the employers to be able to input those things properly. So if there are going to be, and we're trying to do our best to make sure that we maintain quality control and maintain all of the jobs are in the right categories, but we're going to miss some. And so we implemented that as part of our redesign, to try to make the experience of actually finding a job that's relevant to you better. So more to come on that. We have some things in our roadmap that will improve that, but this is one thing that I think maybe people don't know about.
Yeah, and it seems like the tags thing could be another maybe category or some way to kind of navigate through the tags. That would be really cool. But I love that feature where, you can see all anywhere. And I did notice, like, some companies, because it's up to them to categorize this, I've noticed before on some companies that maybe that was a US 100% remote, but they had still categorized it as this. Yeah. So what you, like, say that I'm a company and I'm coming to you, like, how do you advise me on creating this correctly?
So if you go to you can go to the first page of the checkout flow there, and you can see post a job, and you scroll down there and you'll see the different regional restrictions there. You can see company.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's ways we can improve that, but
that seems to me like pretty
Yeah,
If I would see that, I'd be like, oh, this makes sense. So.
yeah. It's but again, not everybody's proficient at posting jobs on the job board, so I get that.
Right.
But again, we try to, as in every way we can, try to focus on simplicity, because I think a lot of job boards and a lot of different communities online just are introduced too much complexity to what really the main focus of the business is. So there's lots of different job boards for remote work specifically that we've seen. They just try to do too many things at once. And so we have every job that you see that's posted on WeWorkRemotely is posted on WeWorkRemotely. So we don't scrape anybody else's boards. We don't pull in from LinkedIn. We don't pull in from any other board. Every board, every job posting that you see has been paid for by the company on WeWorkRemotely. And so that way you can definitely weed out a lot of the not so great jobs. And again, jobs get through, people pay for jobs that maybe aren't the quality that we want them to be. But at the same time, I think we have a really good employer base that uses our service. And so I would stand by any job posting that gets posted on our board. And I'm confident.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what percentages do you see select which types of these?
So the average customer for the employer side of things will pay for the middle option there, the better option.
That's pretty much everything, right? Why are we so attracted to the middle option? I don't know what it is. But.
It's yeah, there's all kinds of research to do with that. But I think we do see one of the main benefits of the best option there. I'm not sure if there are a lot of employers that listen to this podcast, but one of the things that the best option does is it allows you to pin your job to the top of the feed in your respective category for 7 days. So it just means you get more visibility and you get more exposure on social media. You get more, you get a logo, you got highlight, all that kind of stuff. So it's just more exposure, and because we have so many people coming to our board, and it's the landscape of our community is so, it's just we have a large group that come, and so what the employers try to do, and I think we try to accommodate for that, is how do they get more exposure to the community, and so we have those options for them if they want to.
And then this part is kind of a filter your applicants. So when you get applicants from the employer side, how does that filter for them?
Yeah, so that's a feature we actually have been introduced relatively recently. And part of the feedback that we've got a few times from employers is that people just aren't reading the job description. And they aren't, let's say, for example, if a company is very specifically hiring for US-based employees and everybody will apply. And I get the mentality when it comes to it doesn't hurt to apply to a job that you don't necessarily qualify for or aren't qualified for. I get that. But at the same time, if you're an employer, you're wasting a lot of time having to sort through people that you can't even get to the second round of hiring because you know for just a very easy reason that they're not going to be able to work for you. So what we do in that, we have an employee of ours that goes through each of the applications for the jobs that have that option. And we don't exclude anybody from the hiring process. We don't actually remove anybody entirely, but what we do is we rank each of the applicants based on these people meet your qualifications, and like the very, very easy ones, like time zone or whatever, years of experience, that kind of thing, technologies that they're proficient at. Those things get ranked and so here you should look at these applicants first, and then you can look at these applicants if you're still interested, if you still have an opening for it. So we're very careful about not excluding anybody because it's not really it's not our business to do so, but we try to just prioritize and save time for the employers that are posting jobs.
So I'm also curious. So you'd mentioned a couple different pieces of criteria there. If I'm on the job seeker side, what do I really want to make sure of at the very minimum to make sure that I get filtered into the right area here?
So good question. And I think this is really relevant for anybody that's listening to this, applying for jobs right now, is make sure that you read the entire job description. It's very easy to miss something that says, if serious inquiries will include X, Y, Z in their application or on their resume. So if they have very basic restrictions or if they have very basic things that they're looking for, make sure to highlight those things if you have them. And I'm not going to tell you whether you should or shouldn't apply for jobs that you maybe don't. I'm of the mentality that you probably should apply for jobs that you don't necessarily meet all the criteria for. but at the same time, if you do have those things, and if they say they like, one of the things we see a lot is, okay, well, we're looking for a very detail oriented person, and at the bottom of the job description, it will say, please include the word wild duck in your application, and we'll know that you read the whole thing. So just keep an eye on, and if you're doing the approach of apply for lots of different jobs in a day, just take the time to actually read the job description, because oftentimes you'll get weeded out very quickly by not including something that's very basic. So read the entire application.
Do you know what company that was that did that?
Oh, lots do. It's pretty common.
Do you have one on the top of your mind that we could maybe look at and just show that example?
Go to the main page, and I'll see if I usually know most of the companies that do that sort of thing. Just scroll down. Let's see if I can find one.
Animals, probably. Maybe.
Yeah, if it's a writing job, they likely will have something like that.
Yeah, because I know animals is.
Maybe not. I can send, if people are interested, I'm happy to comment on this afterwards and give an example of that.
Yeah, I think I think it's all good, because I think one of the main things I want to highlight within what you said is there will be those little nuggets. And this is not even just things where they require you to send things, but there'll be those little nuggets that you can use in an application, whether that be a video application or outreaching someone separately or finding ways to just really kind of stand out, because every part of this process, you have to be different. You have to be different than everybody else who's applying. And one of the ways to be different is to find the nuggets of wisdom that are just like little, I just call them like Easter eggs, right? Like these little Easter eggs that companies put in there because they're just waiting for someone to do something different. It's like, you're actually helping them. And I think that's the biggest misconception as a job seeker, is that you're bothering people by searching for jobs, but it's like they have a problem. You could be the solution, but all you got to do is really be different and obviously be competent.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've hired I've hired people before, and it's amazing how many people don't. Because I'll do that as well. I'll say, please describe to me. One of the questions I like to ask is, based on your experience with our business and what you've seen so far, where can we improve? Like where, if we're hiring for WeWorkRemotely is for whatever capacity, I would say, what are the areas where you think we can improve on? And some people won't even say anything to that. They won't even, and other people will. You can just tell, took a cursory glance at what we do, don't really understand the business, and will answer that in a way that you can tell pretty quickly that they didn't do the research. Yeah. But just if the job is important to you, and if you want to work with a company, do your research and make sure that you answer things in a way that's thoughtful. And I love that. I love reading applications, and even when I don't hire them, I'm happy to, because we have a pretty large group of companies that have the same ownership. So if we don't see somebody that maybe is a good fit for this company, there might be a chance that we keep your name in the pot, and we have another area we can pull you over to if we need to. Kind of. So just having the reputation of, this is the thing that I'm going to do this application well, and I'm going to put a lot of effort and thought into it, goes a long way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And again, this goes back to the context of like how important that company is for you, right? Yeah. Where you may spend an hour or two on an application, maybe more, researching and developing some sort of value that you can send for one of those top companies, but maybe for one that's maybe not is big of a priority, but you still need to spend. If you want to get a job, you still got to spend some time researching, and that's like the key of it, is figuring out that system that works for you. And that's a lot of what I teach people. Yeah. What patterns or trends have you been able to identify that determine the success of a job listing?
So the job listing, you mean from the employer side of things?
It could be both, right? Because if we're looking at the job seeker side, maybe it may be I don't know if it was the people feel attracted to it, but I guess that all comes back to it being on the employer side.
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think it's something that gets overlooked, or it's underrated when it comes to like you said before, hiring a quality team is the most important thing a business can do well. Like if you're going to be spending time on the most impactful thing for your business, hiring the right people is going to be the best use of your time. And so writing a good job description is actually something that I've seen to be really, really important when it comes to hiring quality people. So I like to see people, because you're really trying to sell your company to potential job seekers. You're trying to convince them to work for you. And that's, again, back to your point of the job seeker has a lot of power, a lot more power than I think they do. Yes, it's a competitive landscape out there, and I get that it's not easy to find remote work, but at the same time, if you're a good worker and if you fit the bill for a specific opening at a company, that company wants to hear from you. They want you to work there. They need you to work there because they wouldn't have an open position. So that's important to keep in mind. I like when companies spend time and show that it's important to them to present their company in a really positive way. And like you said before about detail, about why companies should work there, it's pretty easy when companies are full of shit, when they're just saying things just to say them. And because a company should be able to tell you very specifically, if they have great benefits, they can be able to say, these are the benefits that we provide and this is why it's great. Or if you have a remote culture, it's pretty clear from the way that you write a job description whether that's true or not. So I like when companies get into the specifics of, and not just say we have a great company culture with people love working for us. Okay, well, why? Like, what? Show me an example of that, or show me that you have good reviews on specific sites, or show me that you have the specific benefits that you say that you do. Right. I think transparency when it comes to just how you present your company is really important, and I think it gets overlooked. So, like a long-winded way of saying, when a company is thoughtful about writing their job description and doesn't waste the employee's time of reading through it, and if they've shown that or provided examples of why you should work at the company, then I think it's pretty easy to fill positions.
Yeah, and it does them a disservice as well. I mean, I'm trying to put my mind, like trying to empathize with someone who would create a job listing that was a little bit misleading, so that they could maybe get better candidates, and that's probably what they're thinking in their head, but they're actually shooting themselves in the foot, right? Totally. By not being transparent, because you're attracting the wrong people, and then even if you attract the right people, you've sent them mixed messages that they're most likely not to be, if they're a competitive candidate, they're not going to be happy with what they find out. So I think transparency on both sides is super important. Obviously with candidates and like with what's on their resume, with what's their experience, and you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you get hired to do a job that you can't even do. And then you quickly find out like, oh shit, I've been way over my head,
Yeah, exactly. And things like retention rates and employees that love working at a company, like the world is pretty transparent right now. And so like you said, it does do you a disservice to be when you're dishonest with people about how your company operates. Because it will come back. It might not come back right away. It might not come out in the next year. But eventually, if you don't do a good job managing your employees and making them feel satisfied in their work, then people will talk about it. Like it doesn't do you any good to be misleading with that kind of thing.
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, you run the remote podcast, or the remote show, which is a podcast. You had mentioned on Twitter that being a good interviewer, being a good podcaster is hard. Tell me a little bit more.
Well, because you have to do a lot of things well that maybe go overlooked. And this obviously because you do this well. And so you obviously thought about this. But I think people don't realize that there's a lot of preparation that goes into a podcast, and the podcast landscape right now is so competitive that when I'm doing a podcast, I'm always thinking this person is listening to me instead of listening to somebody else. And how many other great podcasts are out there that are from experts that are way more experienced than I am, and probably have more interesting things to say. So that is always in my mind. And it's also, you want to make it so that it's engaging, you want to have it be conversational, but you also want it to flow in a way that makes sense, that keeps people's attention. You don't want to have it too long, but also not too short. It's a tricky thing, keeping people's attention right now, especially. And I think because I'm very picky when it comes to podcasts. I have a couple of podcasts that I really, really like and don't miss an episode. But when it comes to audio quality or just the way that a person's voice is, like, I'm very particular about voices. And so you have to do a lot of good things really, really well to make a good podcast. And not only the research and quality of content that goes into that. I think it's a really competitive thing, and it's a really hard thing to do well.
And it seems like it just takes ages to get people behind it, right? To realize what it is you're doing is quality. And like you said, you're competing with so many various voices who have better experience, have more to say, have all these things. So you kind of go through that maybe imposter syndrome a little bit.
Totally.
I'm curious, what's been the biggest lesson? Because how many episodes have you done now?
It's probably mid 30s, if not 40 episodes or so. We had to scale it back a bit because we couldn't go into the studio as a result of COVID. And again, I'm very particular, or we try to put out quality audio content as well. So if the audio content isn't so good, there's been episodes that we haven't released because of that. So the biggest lesson for me, I think, is just everybody has their own. I don't want to say like insecurities, but I think in a lot of ways, for me, like I've been able to talk to some really interesting people and some people that I really, really respect, and have sort of, to me, are in like a whole nother range of success, and just some really interesting people. So I think that getting them in a conversation and talking to them is humbling, but it's also it's a nice thing to realize that these are just people. They are as self-conscious, and often more self-conscious than people assume they are. And just because they appear that they have everything going for them, and things come very easily to them, they often struggle with the exact same things that everybody else does.
Right.
So when I was able to talk to Jason Fried of Basecamp on the podcast, and he's a hero of mine, and has been for a long time. And so I actually said to him, "Look, I'm really happy that you took the time to do this, and I'm very grateful, but I'm also very nervous to talk to you, because if it seems that I'm nervous, it's because I am." and he said something like, "Oh, like, don't worry about that. I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy." And so we had a good conversation, and he was very gracious with his time, and I really liked talking to him. He asked a lot of questions to me, which is interesting as well.
Yeah.
But just the biggest takeaway is that everybody just is, we're just people, and we have the same things that everybody else does.
Yeah, and we want to have a connection. We want to talk about cool stuff. And I notice people don't have a problem talking about themselves for the most part. They enjoy talking about what they're passionate about. Speaking of what you're passionate about, dogs, and you have a dog yourself, Charlie, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, you did your research. Well done.
I do a little bit of research. So tell me, if you were a dog, what type of dog would you be?
Ooh, it's funny. I actually have an answer to that question, because my fiance and I have talked about that before. We're I think probably in the spectrum of dog nut people. So this isn't something that we've actually thought about this. I think I'd be like I don't want to say, like, I think I would like to think I would be like a German Shepherd or like a Bernese Mountain Dog. Probably more Bernese Mountain Dog. I'm not sure if you know that breed at all.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so that really nice dog, and everybody seems to not just a very consistent, nice dog. So I'd probably go with something like that. We had a Shepherd growing up, and I'm partial to Shepherds. Charlie is a bit of a mix, so he's
big, huh?
Yeah, so when we got him, he was 150 pounds. He's down now. We adopted him 3 years ago, and he's down to about 130 now. But he's got his issues, but we love him.
This is for people there in the chat. If you were a dog, what type of dog would you be? And I think this is an interesting question, because there's like that ideal dog that like there's a lot of different lanes of thought. It's like you can pick like the ideal dog that you think kind of characterizes you.
Yeah.
There's dogs that like look. I mean, I walk by this guy every day. I swear to God, I see him pretty much every day. It's an older gentleman that walks down Fifth Ave, which is a couple blocks on the way to the gym that I go to, and which they're open, like they do private boxing classes in like this really small backyard because I'm here in Mexico, and it's, you know, whatever happens. And he's walking with his dog every day, and he looks like his dog. You know, you have those people that actually, like, the hair of the dog is gray and it's thin, and he's kind of like hopping around like that. He's older. The guy's older as well. It's just like them too. It's like they look like each other, which is super interesting. So it's like you kind of have the dog that maybe you look like, the dog that you want too could be completely different. Because I want like I really would want like a miniature husky.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why. I just like a husky. I like the way they look, but the size, like I can't imagine having a 150-pound dog. That just like terrifies me.
It complicates things a little bit too, because he doesn't like to go anywhere, so he does his own thing. Yeah. It's a good question though, because you're right. Like, it's the dog that you want. You, at least I think a lot of people, and myself included, would like to think that you are the dog that you want, but oftentimes that's not the case, or not likely to be the case. Right. But also, one of those things you should probably ask people that are around me what kind of dog I am. Probably give you a better answer than I can give you. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I still have the animals job listing up. Oh yeah. It's just kind of funny. Animals, dogs. Okay, so Matt, it's been a pleasure, man. I appreciate the time today. I'm curious if you have any last words to remote job seekers, remote employers, anything that you'd want to say to them if they're thinking about either using WeWorkRemotely or any of your job boards. Yeah, so I would say to the job seekers out there, one of the things that we didn't talk about and I was hoping to just mention is a really interesting way of getting people's attention is if you have a skill, like let's say, so this is something that happened to us recently. So we had a videographer reach out to us, and he said, hey, I'm not sure if you're in the market for this or not, but I've been working on a side project and I have some free time right now. I created these ads for you. Use them if you want to. It's totally up to you, but I did this because I thought it was interesting and I like what you guys are doing. So we weren't actually in the market for hiring a videographer to do ads for us. But if we were even close to considering that, we would have hired this guy, because I would have, because it's and they were good ads. Like we had them, but they were good, and you could tell this person did the work. They created something that they were proud of, and they presented it to us and said, hey, use this if you want to. And I've seen that to be very successful when, like, if you're an SEO person, they do SEO audits and said, hey, love what you're doing. This is what I do. Here's an example of that. Use it if you want to. Kind of approach can be very successful when it comes to differentiating yourself, and especially if your company's hiring for the position that you're wanting, or if the skill you have, just showing your skill and saying, this is what I can do for you. Makes it very easy for the employer to say, hey, we know what this person can do now. It de-risks the situation a lot, and it makes the job of the hiring manager very easy. So that's something that I think is really a really powerful tool for people to be able to use if they want to find remote jobs. But yeah, putting yourself out there, making sure that you do the work, finding ways to differentiate yourself is the key to the game right now. And it's how best to do that, and finding creative ways to do that is I think probably what you do and what you spend a lot of time with. But I think that would be something to really think about if you're serious about this. Totally. And it goes back to like value, right? It's like you may not be providing someone to work for free, but you may be providing them an SEO audit or ads that they can use. I've had a couple examples that recently have worked out really well. One of those was a social media marketing manager that I was working with, who submitted mock ads and mock blog posts to the people that she was applying to, and then I had a customer service person. This one was interesting too. It's that if you're within like customer support and you're looking for a job in that, go through a customer support experience with them. Like, sign up for their newsletter, submit a ticket, do whatever it is you can to get that kind of feedback from those teams, and then you can use that as a barometer to make suggestions. We did like a whole video walkthrough of like, hey, here's different parts of this page that you might want to change.
that you might want to have easier to navigate. So there's so many options out there, and like you said, it's a creative piece where you're not limited to anything. So the more creative you can get, I think the better.
Yeah, just do everything you can to make the job of the hiring manager easier, because that if you make people's lives easy, I found that to be a really powerful thing to get what you want.
Yeah. Yeah, being proactive, figuring out what kind of issues that they need solved, and then giving them an option to solve it, right? And the attachment piece, I love that the guy who sent you that stuff was not attached to it at all. It wasn't like, hey, here's these ads, you better hire me. It's like, here's these ads, use them, go ahead. Like, I could care less, because I know that when you go to look for someone like this, I'm going to be the first on the list.
Totally, yeah. And it made our job very easy, which is really the key to the game. So definitely that's something that I'd like to leave people with. But from the employer side, I think WeWorkRemotely is, and it's not just my bias here. We are the largest remote specific job board in the world. We see very few jobs that don't get filled on our platform by people that are looking for jobs. So I think reach out to us if you have any questions. But it's a pretty powerful way to get quality remote workers into your company. And again, write quality job descriptions. Don't include stupid buzzwords and titles. Don't say we're looking for a rock star, blah blah blah. Like, it's just kind of annoying when people see that, because it doesn't.
Ninja, we need a ninja.
I know. It's like, anyways, but don't do that. Be professional, but be transparent, and just put a lot of thought into it, and you should be good.
I know what your pet peeves are. That's good. No ninjas.
No ninjas and no rock stars, please.
No rock stars. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in, especially Sam, who would be a bearded collie. And apparently they're pretty intelligent and not that common, just like Sam. And thanks everybody again for showing up for this week's edition of Remote Weekly Spotlight. Thanks again, Matt, and everybody out there. Go check out WeWorkRemotely.com and all of the other boards from TinyBoards as well. Keep wandering. You're not lost.